This is Photographing the West podcast, the podcast for people who love to explore the western highways and byways while photographing the landscape and wildlife. And now here's your host, Kirby Flanagan.
Hello, and welcome to episode 54 of the Photographing the West podcast. I'm your host, Kirby Flanagan. Each episode is brought to you by Flanagan Photos. Twice a month, we bring you interviews with interesting people doing interesting things. Today, I have with me Colorado-based teacher and wildlife photographer Russ Burden, well known for his Tanzania photo tours. We're going to discuss wildlife photography in general and safari photography in particular. Welcome to Photographing the West, Russ.
Thanks, Kirby. I appreciate the invite.
You're very welcome. So for those who don't know you, tell everyone about yourself as a person and a photographer.
I grew up in New York, moved out to Colorado, I guess around 1990. I taught for 27 years back there, and in teaching, the New York schedule is you have the summers off. So I kind of bailed out of New York and went out with a friend of mine who is also kind of just a budding photographer. And I really wouldn't call myself a photographer at the time, but just more wanting to kind of get out of New York and see the West. So in the summer of 1973, jumped in the car and we were supposed to head up to Alaska. We never made it up to Alaska. He got a job offer, so we had to kind of cut our trip short. But it was still an amazing adventure. And I'll never forget driving on US 40 in Colorado. And I saw the mountains, this outline of the mountains kind of looming off in the distance. And as I drove closer and closer to them, I just knew one day, oh my gosh, I would definitely be living there. I grew up looking at photos of the mountains. I was always enamored with photos of the mountains. I lived 45 minutes from the beach, but the West and the mountains definitely were in my blood a lot more so than the sand and surf. So like I said, I taught for 27 years. I always grew up wanting to share my knowledge, share my enthusiasm with others. I was always curious about things, how things worked, the science behind how things worked, and a whole lot more. And that desire to want to know about everything goes hand in hand with wanting to share what it is that I learned. So I guess that's how teaching got into my blood. When I teach, when I was in the classroom, basically my philosophy was what I called contagious enthusiasm, where I would get excited about the topic and hopefully the kids would. I carry that over into my safaris and tours at this point in time. I believe that humor goes a long way in keeping people dialed in and tuned in to wanting to learn more. And my strategy in teaching is if somebody asks me a question, what I do is I answer with a question. And this makes people think. So if somebody asks me, hey, what do I need to do to get more depth of field? I will ask, well, what are some of the features on the camera that would allow you to control depth of field? So this way they think about it, and then they say the aperture, and we kind of go into a whole dialogue about that. So rather than just tell people and then they forget, the more they think about it, the more that that concept is going to stay dialed in with them. Where I got started in photography, there was I was sitting on the stoop. The stoop is a back east concept of, where you grow up. It's the stairs in front of your home. And there was this white cat that was just kind of walking around, and my sister had a camera. She was sort of into photography. It was one of those cameras where you'd pop a flash bulb into that chrome fitting. And I kind of, thought that was pretty cool. Hey, how come this bulb can go in here and emit light and you could take a picture with it? My sister showed me how to use the camera. I stuck a flash bulb in it. This cat came around and I took a photo of it. So I waited the week that it normally took to get pictures back. Rode my bicycle down to the drugstore to get the pictures, and the cat had this pink eye, and I said, "Whoa, how cool is that? You know, what caused that?" So here's my curiosity wanting to know again. And that kind of planted the seed. When I found out, well, it's the reflection off the back of the eye, and how cool this is to do this kind of stuff with photography. So I dabbled a little bit. I eventually bought a Konica T, moved up to a T3 and a T4. I still own my Konica T4. It's downstairs in my basement on a shelf. I love every once in a while going down, looking at it. I would shoot slide film with it. In another body, I had black and white film, and in a third body, I would have color negative film. So I was your typical photo geek with 3 cameras around their neck with just ugly camera straps. And in one body there was the slide film, and the other one was black and white, and the other one was color negative film. And I spend many an hour and day in the black and white dark room, loving that. I graduated to printing color from negatives, and eventually switched on over to digital when that came out. First camera that I owned, actually, no, you know what? Before that, when I went from my Konica to Nikon, how I eventually got into Nikon was through a film camera. And I had a 6006, I had an 8008, and then I had an F5, and then F5 I shot film. And then eventually when digital came out, I went to the D100, the D200, the D300, and now I own the D500, and I absolutely love that camera. And then just one more little thing about how I got into photography and how it evolved into where it is today is I found out about a camera club, and it was in Flushing, New York. And at this point I was driving, and I joined the Flushing Camera Club. I became very active. There were some amazing photographers in there. I said, one day I want to be able to score higher than these guys were scoring. And that was kind of my motivator. And I just kind of worked at it and stuck with it, persisted, learned, read, absorbed as much as I could. I just felt like a sponge. And then I went on to start to give instructional shows. I'd go on field trips. I'd eventually lead day trips. We'd go to the zoo. We'd go downtown Manhattan. I still have, and this is tough to say, shots of the World Trade Center, and I'll cherish those forever. We went to the old World's Fairground in Queens, and just had a great time. And just the photography just kept evolving from there, and it grew into where it is today. So that's a little bit of the background. I'm probably a little long-winded, but that's how I got to be where it is that I am today. Motivation, persistence, perseverance, and dedication, and definitely a strong passion for what it is that the art is. I mean, it's just an amazing art form.
Well, you certainly brought out all of those qualities in yourself in your discussion. So good to know. So you started as a landscape photographer. What prompted you to transition into wildlife photography, that is?
Okay. So when I did my trips out west, it was from New York, where would you go? You'd obviously go to the Tetons, you'd go to the Slot Canyons, you'd go to Monument Valley, Arches, Canyonlands, Bryce and Zion, the Oregon coast, and I kept on going back and really learning about each one of those places. Captured a lot of the feel and aura of each one of those locations. And after learning them frontwards and backwards, I said, you know what, I could maybe, make some money and bring people to these locations. And I kind of tried my hand at that. One thing that I am is a firm believer in, before running a workshop to any place that I'm going to bring people, is that I know the place inside out. So I certainly visited each location many times, always at the same time of year. So I knew that the sun angles would remain consistent. The weather patterns would pretty much be the same. And I eventually started to bring people to those spots. The thing is, though, in going to those places, first on my own and then going back again and again with groups, my photos began to become extremely redundant. How many times can you photograph Monument Valley at the dunes with the totem and the Yebichi rocks with a blue sky? That it doesn't really change unless the light does something very, very special. In those locations, they're pretty much blue sky locations, and things don't change up all that much. I certainly did get some spectacular sunrises and sunsets, but for the most part, it was the same stuff over and over. So I was a member of the Mile High Wildlife Photo Club after moving out here to the Denver area in Colorado. And I saw some just phenomenal wildlife photos. And there was the scenic category and there was the wildlife category. So I always competed in the scenic category. And every once in a while, I'd go down to the local duck pond and try my hand at doing some waterfowl. And it just kind of wasn't cutting the mustard. So I said, you know what, I need a new challenge. I need to go out and pursue wildlife. So rather than go to a lot of the scenic locations, I said, you know what, it's time to go do some of the wildlife locations. And it was just, more and more going to the spots where the animals were, as opposed to going to the locations to get the gorgeous sunrise with the red rocks or the Grand Teton or Bandon Beach in Oregon. And I wanted to be able to compete in Mile High. And it was, again, I'm fairly motivated to do that kind of stuff and get to where it is that I want to be if I set a goal. And I set my goal to say someday I want to be able to compete with those guys. And again, persistence, patience, and a lot of learning. And I fell in love with wildlife photography. The challenges, the difficulty, what it is that you've got to learn, how you've got to see what it is that you're photographing, just made me say, you know what, wildlife photography, that's what I want to do. So that's pretty much how I made that switch.
So now you lead photo workshops all over the world, but your first love seems to be Tanzania. So how did that get started?
Oh, gosh. Okay. So in 2014, there was a lady in the Mile High Wildlife Photo Club who said, you know what, you lead photo trips all over the country. You go to New England, you go out west, you go to the coast, you go to Florida, you're all over the place. Have you ever thought about going to Africa? And I said, well, I don't know the logistics. I'd have to, learn all of that. She had run a couple of workshops to there. She said, why don't we team up? So I teamed up with her. And in 2014, made my first safari, got 12 people. So we wound up doing back-to-back safaris. We did, each safari is 14 days. So basically I was there the entire month of April. And we would do one from the beginning of April to mid-April, took a day in between, and then picked up a second group of people and started safari number 2. On the very first safari, from that first day when we got out into the bush, it was, oh my gosh, I was just hooked. By the second day, I was totally addicted. What we saw, the diversity of the animals, the species, proliferation of animals, just absolutely amazing. And being in Yellowstone and hearing that people say Yellowstone is like the Serengeti, yeah, Yellowstone is great, but when you compare it to the Serengeti, there really is no comparison. I mean, I love Yellowstone. I will go back. Obviously, you know, the wolves and the bison and the pronghorn and some of the other species you get to photograph there. Not other places have that. The sheer number of animals that you can photograph in Tanzania. I mean, around every corner, around every bend, there's just something new. But, you know, from the smallest bird to up to the elephant, it's not even close as far as the number of species. And that's pretty amazing. And also the light. There's something very special about the light because of the dust. You know, there is dust that you need to contend with, and that is an issue. You keep your cameras covered, not a problem, but because of that dust, the light there is phenomenal. You get that early morning sunrise coming through the dust that the animals are kicking up, and it creates like a fog type of illusion. And how it doesn't get much better than that. Got an amazing guide from Africa Nature Photography, and I've been working with him now since 2014. So for both trips in 2014, both trips in April of 2015, both in 2016 and 2017, I started to go in April and in September to do the crossing of the Mara River. Did both of those again in 18. And I've got trips planned that are currently sold out for 2019 for both trips in April and my September trip too. I'm looking to do a bird trip in June. It's a little bit tougher to fill those because it's much more specialized. But there is anybody out there who's interested, I've got one spot left for that safari in June, and it is going to be primarily focusing on the birds. If we see a cheetah with cubs and they're playing like crazy and it's morning light, obviously we're going to stop and photograph them, but the primary target is going to be birds. If there's just an elephant standing out in the field or a giraffe standing out in the field, we will pass that by to go looking for things like lilac-breasted rollers and the bee-eaters and all of the different other species. My guide, his abilities, his sighting abilities, just absolutely off the charts, amazing. I mean, what he can see, the smallest bird, where, you know, he's telling everybody, look over there in that tree, in that little nook or crotch of the limb. There's a kingfisher, and we're all looking, and where is it? And then finally he drives just basically up to it, and he sees it 100 feet away. We've grown to be really good friends. The Swahili word for brother is kaka, K-A-K-A. That's what I now call him. He's just a great guy. We've developed a great relationship, and the passion that I have for Tanzania is off the charts. Like I said, I'm just totally addicted. It's an amazing location.
What's the best time of year to be there?
There's some great times a year. I go in April. They say it's actually the low season because they say it's the rainy season. Since 2014, we've been rained out of one sunset session, and that's it. When they say the rainy season, what they're meaning is that same thing out in Colorado. You know, you're driving out and you're driving out in the plains, and there's a storm, 40 miles out in the distance, you can see the storm. And that's what they mean by rain there. Every once in a while, will the storm pass over you? Sure it will. But, it lasts 5 minutes. The benefits, oh my gosh, you get water holes there, so the animals are drinking. The grasses are green, so you're following the wildebeest migration. Proliferation of flowers, all over the place. When we're in the Ngorongoro crater, it's totally green. There's a section of the crater towards the end of April that explodes with flowers. We look for zebras. We look for elephants. We look for rhinos. They love to consume the flowers. It's different nutrients for them, and the settings are just absolutely gorgeous. So when you hear the rainy season, if that's what they call the rainy season, bring me there at any time of year. Another very popular time to go, I do not go in February. The prices are very high. People go there primarily to see the birthing of the wildebeests because they definitely are on schedule as far as that goes. The hunting of the babies and all does get a little bit gruesome. And that's not the primary reason why I want to go. Do I enjoy seeing a cheetah chase down something and photograph that? Absolutely. But when it's real easy, and a little bit on the sad side, I tend to stay away from February. Plus the crowds. When you go there in February because everybody else is there and something good is going on, you've got 50 vehicles surrounding whatever it is that's occurring, and what's in your background? You've got other safari vehicles. In April, there's been times when we've had some just absolutely phenomenal action, and we're the only two vehicles on it. And that's pretty darn special. We can get any angle we want. We can, if the light is coming in from the side or, wherever the best light angle is where we need to be, get a good background. We can jockey the vehicles and get that accomplished. So that's a total plus for that time of year. September, again, is the high season, but we go in September, and that's primarily for the crossing of the Mara River by the wildebeests and the zebras as they come back from Kenya. What they're doing is they're following the rains. The rains come back into Tanzania at that time of year. So what they're doing is that they come back from Kenya. What's great about September is that when they're coming back from Kenya, we're sitting on the Tanzania side. So as they're crossing the river, they are facing us, and they're jumping off these sides of the cliffs and kicking up dust. But rather than photographing their butts, is like what happens in June. There is the thing that's nice is that we're photographing them coming toward us, and that works out great. So we're seeing the zebras, we're seeing the wildebeests splashing through the water. And, when you see it, 2,000, 1,000, 3,000 at a time, and it goes on for 15 minutes, it's just really special. We had a great crossing this year right at sunset, and the light was magnificent. And there was like at least 2,000 crossing, and it was pretty phenomenal. June would be the time that I would run the bird trip. I don't know if there's really a bad time to go to Tanzania because there's always going to be some wildlife somewhere. It's just a matter of kind of knowing the area. And when you've got a guide who's as good as the guide that I use, he'd be finding us pictures. So it's all good.
Are there any particular parks that you like to go to?
Serengeti is primarily where we go, and then the Ngorongoro Crater and the Ngorongoro Conservation Area. The Ndutu area is great. That's in the Ngorongoro Conservation Area. And what's wonderful about that, we spend in April 4 nights there. And the reason for that is there are no driving restrictions. You can drive off the road. So wherever the animal is, you can track it, you can follow it. If there are birds that are, in these crotches of trees, if there's a leopard that's somewhere walking through the trees, you can get off the road and follow it. We had a lioness hiding 5 cubs, and we just kind of got to this location, sat there, waited a little bit, and sure enough, what she did is she was bringing them from one location to the next. So after a couple of years, I finally got that iconic shot of where the lioness picks up the baby in her mouth, just super, super gentle. And the head angle was great. The light angle was great. The background was great. And she just walked right toward us. And she wound up carrying 2 of the 5. And when she was carrying the second, the other 3 were just kind of following behind. I guess they didn't want to have mama's mouth on them. But for whatever reason, she didn't get to carry all 5, but we did get 2 out of the 5. And it was pretty special. So the Ndutu area is great. Love that. The Ngorongoro Crater is phenomenal in April. When we go there in September, we only spend a day there because it's browned up, it's dried up, the weather has changed in September. So we don't do a whole lot of time in the Ngorongoro Crater at that time of year, but the Ngorongoro Crater being an ecosystem unto itself and also being the only place where you're going to get to possibly photograph the rhino, we've got to spend a day there. Pretty much the Serengeti and the crater and the conservation area are the places that you go to. And what's nice is different parts of the Serengeti, like the northern Serengeti, is got the rolling hills, the downslopes and the upslopes. So as far as seeing the vastness of the migration, you can get to see that because you hear thousands of wildebeests, and as you're looking down the hill, you can see them, and then it gets to the bottom of the little valley, and then as you see them all on the uphill, rather than just being on a flat plain where they become a merger and one blends into the background of the next. It's not the most conducive for photography. It's great to show the number of wildebeests, but photographically, when you can get the downslope and the upslope, it works better. Like I said, there's never a bad time. There's always good places to go. It's just a matter of knowing where the animals are and what you can get when you're there. I think you can feel it, that I am totally addicted to the country and the people.
Yeah, sounds like it. All right. So you're a writer as well as a photographer. How did you get started doing that?
I guess in like I said, I love to share what it is that I know. I love to share my knowledge. And when I wasn't in direct contact with other photographers, I kind of needed to find an avenue that would allow me to share what it is that I've learned. So I gave writing a whirl. I always illustrated my beginning articles with images that would point out what it is that I was trying to say. I'd write about a technique, use a photo that showed what it would look like if you used the technique and if you didn't use the technique. So basically a before and after. So here's a shot without flash. Here's a shot where you use fill flash and look at the difference. Here's a shot with the polarizer, with no polarizer. Here's a shot with the polarizer spun the proper way. So it would show people, oh, okay, now I get it, without being in the field with somebody where you could physically show them in person. I tried to illustrate that through print. People liked what it is that I put out there, so I wrote another and another and another. And while I was doing that, I was also teaching classes for the Digital Photo Academy in New York. And the person in charge there saw what it is that I wrote and asked me if I'd take a stab at writing their curriculums. I said, oh my gosh, that's a fairly big undertaking. But then again, me being who it is that I am, like type A to the nth degree, and always being up for a challenge, I said, let me give it a whirl. And I did it. And I guess at that point, I became a writer. I guess that gave me the official designation. I've been doing it ever since. In creating what it is that I write, I like to be poetic, a little bit more creative with my words rather than just cut and dry. Don't want to do it as just like a manual type of writing. Do it more where, I'll add a little humor in there, add a little interest in there, a little personal anecdote to show people that, this is a human that is sharing his knowledge as opposed to some script writer that's just out there putting words together and wordsmithing something so that it sounds like a textbook. Not my style as far as that goes.
You've been writing for Outdoor Photographer for a while. How did you get started with that?
Okay, so I've been writing their tip of the week I even have to go back, but it's been at least 10 years. And how that came to be is as my writing progressed, I would query Outdoor Photographer, and also there was another magazine that's now defunct. It was called Outdoor Nature Photographer. Say, hey, how I proposed an article, how about something on whatever? And they'd say, yeah, give it a whirl. So submit it and see what happens. And, after getting that first one published, that was certainly a motivator to say, well, let me try more. So I got a number of articles published in each one of them. And once Outdoor Nature Photographer died, I submitted more and more to Outdoor Photographer and got more and more published, maybe 1 or 2 articles a year, but enough to keep me going. And this led to my querying to ask the editor, at this point, the guy's name was Chris Robinson. And he said, sure, let's give that a whirl. They love the idea, and it's been history ever since. And since Chris was the editor, they've now had a bunch of different ones. Wes Pitts is now the current editor there, and we've established a relationship, over the internet. And he's a great guy, working out really well. And if you go to the Outdoor Photographer website and click on Tip of the Week, I don't know how many hundreds, maybe even up to thousands of tips of the week that are on the website that are written by me. And it's all kind of general knowledge or technique related. The technique ones are specifically directed to illustrate kind of like a concrete photo technique. The general ones are just as the word says, kind of general photography. I used to write a Photoshop tip. The others, the general ones and the technique ones, they receive more attention. So I stopped doing the Photoshop one All the tips have at least 3 photos that accompany the text. And the ones that I've been submitting these past 2 rounds, where I submit like 20 articles at a time, and those have had more photos, because I feel that the more photos that illustrate what it is that I'm writing, the more people can see what it is that I'm trying to share. You know, as I go on, I'll probably continue to even do more. And that works out great. So to give you some sort of indication, the general ones are some of the titles, motivation. So my idea to get you to get motivated. What can I do to inspire you to go out and make new pictures? Another one was called Attain Success Through Failure. So if you fail and you learn what it is that you did that's wrong and now correct it, how that's actually a good thing. Basic fall color tips, how to create good foregrounds, small scale scenics. So, you know, look down at your feet and see what's going on down there rather than photograph all of the Tetons. What if there's tundra type of vegetation that's creating a nice abstract pattern? Don't overlook that. Some of the technique ones, aim for the sun. So if you're shooting into the sun, what are some strategies to get sun stars, how to create a sun star? Photograph the conventional unconventionally. So your standard subjects that you'd be out there shooting, what can you do to make them a little bit different, to separate them from other people's pictures? Different techniques by getting in close, or trying a filter, or zooming the lens, or panning the camera, you know, to do something like that. So that's just, you know, kind of a small background of what it is that you'd read if you visited the OP website to see what it is that is out there. I encourage everybody to go visit the website and check out the tips. And if you like what you read, leave a couple of some feedback, and I try to get back to all the people, especially on the current ones that are posted, as soon as I can. So your presence is known as I read through your comments, and I try to stay up to date with that as much as I can.
So you love to teach. What are some of the important points you like to teach?
My business slogan is, it's all about the light. To me, light is the single most important aspect that is going to control the success of an image. I always say that I'd rather photograph a subject that's a little bit more mundane in great light than a great subject in really flat, ugly light. The Tetons on a gray, ugly day versus a shot of a chameleon in super great light with a super background, I'll take the chameleon, because the light to me is the important thing. I have a shirt that says it's all about the light. It's on my website. Basically, light is the ingredient. The word photography, think of what the derivative of photography, photo, meaning light, graphy meaning to write. What are you doing? You're writing with light. That's what photography is all about. Another one of my standard taglines that I share with people all the time is edit before pressing the shutter. If you like to sit down in front of the computer and go through picture after picture after picture and hit delete, 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 you can ignore edit before pressing the shutter. But if you don't want to spend a lot of time in front of the computer, if you prefer to be optimizing pictures instead of editing pictures, then edit before pressing the shutter. What does edit before pressing the shutter mean? If you've got so say for instance, you go to Tanzania, and I call it the first zebra syndrome, and you see your first zebra, and it's in terrible light. Its butt is facing you, the background is horrendous, and there's really nothing interesting about the photo at all, but you've never photographed a zebra in your life, take that photo. That's now become your placeholder. That's the best photo of a zebra that you have, but you don't need to take 50 of that same picture. Now your goal is to up that placeholder. Wait till it turns its head. Wait until it moves to a better spot. Then take that picture. Now you've just improved and you can delete that first one. The process is to keep on upping that placeholder that you've captured. And once you know that you've got that good shot in the tank, then hold off. If the next encounter you have with a zebra, if it's not better than what it is you already have, edit before pressing the shutter. What I tell people, and this resonates usually fairly strongly with them, is that it's just as important to know when not to press the shutter as it is to know when to press the shutter. If you know when not to press the shutter because it's not going to make a great shot, that's equally as important as knowing when to press the shutter because it's going to be a great shot. Another one of my slogans is the background is equally as important as the subject. If you could have a great subject in good light, but if the background is busy, confusing, chaotic, and you can't differentiate the background from the subject is not going to stand out. What do you do in that situation? Edit before pressing the shutter. Wait, you got the light, wait till the animal comes out to something where there's a better background. Then make the image. And another one of my favorites is exhaust all possibilities. What does exhaust all possibilities mean? Exhaust all possibilities means look to your left, look to your right, look up, look down, shoot everything as a vertical, shoot everything as a horizontal, shoot everything wide, shoot everything in close. You've got an animal, the environment is beautiful, zoom that lens to the wide setting. Now you've got a shot of the environment with the animal in the environment. Now you've got that shot, zoom the lens in, and now you've got a photo of the animal, full frame, and if you're close enough to even just get a headshot. So walking away from any given situation with as many possibilities as you can, that's in essence what exhaust all possibilities means. So, and those are things that I stress all the time when I'm running a safari, when I'm running a workshop. Those are my classic taglines. I have more, but those are the ones that to me are the ones that stand out. Just a couple. One other one is watch for blinkies and monitor your red channel. Exposure is extremely important, and the reds are the most delicate. So monitor your red channel. You don't want to create mushy reds. And there's more that I could go on and on about these taglines that I have. Come with me on a safari or come with me on a tour, and I'll share them all with you. They certainly work, and they will definitely improve your photography.
You mentioned earlier that you were a Nikon shooter, but we didn't talk about lenses. So what lenses do you like to use for your wildlife photography?
Okay, so with the gear that I have, yes, I am a Nikon guy. I've got two D500s. I use a 600 millimeter with a 1.4 if I'm photographing small birds. That's on one body. I have an 80-400 that is on another body. This is when I go to Tanzania or when I'm photographing down in Florida or down in Bosque del Apache. I also have a 16-80 in case I want to do some scenics that we encounter or the wildlife in the environment. Let me just say one thing. Yeah, I am a Nikon guy, but that doesn't mean that Nikon is the best system. At any one given time, Canon comes out with great stuff. Sony comes out with great stuff. To me, and this is super important, it's not the system that you own. It's the fact that you learn how to use the camera that you have. That's the most important thing. If you don't know how to use the camera, if you don't know how to use all the features, you're shortchanging yourself. It amazes me how people go out and drop 25 grand on a system. And, when we're out in the field, I hear, well, oh gosh, I didn't know my camera could do that. One of the tips that I wrote on the Outdoor Photographer website is RTM, read the manual. While the manual is not going to inspire you as far as, oh my gosh, look at this fantastic read that I've got in front of me, it will teach you how to use your camera. And to know every feature that your camera has is super important. So again, just because I'm a Nikon shooter doesn't mean that, people need to go out and buy Nikon. Buy the system that you feel most comfortable with. Buy the system that feels good in your hand. Buy the system that you think that you're going to wind up using. The most important thing is to use it and to get to know how to use it. Super important as far as that goes.
Great advice. Any interest in mirrorless at this point?
Not there. I'm a firm believer, and I want to, a lot of people are going to mirrorless because of the size. I still have that psychological thing where I don't mind carrying it around. It gives me my exercise. It keeps me younger. I will fight age until the day I die. Like the feel of that big camera. Plus, I'm not enamored with that electronic look through the viewfinder that the mirrorless has. I still want to see, that reality when you look through the viewfinder. There are definite pluses: the frame capture rate, the live histogram, the live feedback, all of that, definitely plus features. But there's something about the feel of an SLR, of a standard SLR, that I want and that I love. Till they work out some of these other little bugs, I'm going to stick with what it is that I have. Nikon and Canon just did come out with their mirrorless cameras. Sony's been out with it for a while. They're definitely ahead in the curve as far as the mirrorless system goes. I know a lot of people that have switched over to it. To me, I'd rather know my system and have that feel of bulky. Here's it fills my hand, and I'm loving what it is that I feel in my hand. So not quite ready to make the transition.
Okay, fair enough. I just got a Z7 this fall, and I've been pleasantly surprised at how much fun it is to shoot with.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've played with them, a couple of times, and I've had people on tours that have them, and I'm amazed at seeing what it is that you can get, but not there yet, Kirby, not there.
Okay. So before we go, tell everyone where they can find you, your photos, and your workshops.
Website, pretty simple, russburdenphotography.com. Dial that into your search field, and you'll come up with my website. I do have a presence on Facebook. I do have a Facebook photography page. The outdoor tip of the week, check that out. just visit outdoor photographers, go to the search field, or do the pull down menus and find tip of the week, and you'll see all the tips that I've written. I've had some stuff through, thankfully, Nature's Best Photography, where they've I've been successful in that competition, and had some stuff hanging up in the Smithsonian, so that was certainly a thrill. I just love to have the opportunity to share my knowledge and enthusiasm with every photographer, teach them something new, teach them something creative, show them some really cool locations, show them how to better use their gear, have a great time while doing it on either one of my safaris or on one of my nature tours. I do a lot of teaching while I'm running a trip, and I've got tons of repeat customers, so I guess I'm doing something right. I'm not a flag waver, but I do enjoy sharing what it is that I learn, and sharing it is what I know, so that people can learn. And it's photography to me is a passion. I love it. And I will, when I take my last breath, I hope it's with a camera in my hand and I'm making a picture of something fantastic.
Sounds good to me. Well, thanks for being on Photographing the West, Russ. It's been a lot of fun, and I've learned a little along the way as well. Show notes, including Russ's photos, are at www.flanaganphotos.com. Spelled FLANAGANPHOTOS.com. Please leave us a review on iTunes. Bye for now, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks for listening to Photographing the West podcast. Please subscribe to the podcast in iTunes and leave us a review. Till next time, here's wishing you safe travels and good light.